Hi there, welcome to What's Happening in Brazil. Let's start with the latest news from the country.
The Copa America football tournament, which kicked off on June 13th, has already accounted for more than 50 cases of COVID-19 among players, employees, and delegation members. The sporting event takes place in Brazil after two countries gave up on hosting the competition: Colombia, due to protests against the government, and Argentina, due to a rise in the number of COVID-19 cases. The announcement that Brazil would host the event was met with criticism, seeing as the pandemic remains out of control and specialists fear the onset of a third wave in the country over the next month. On June 15th, the country reached a figure of 490,000 dead from the disease. Despite being behind the United States in the total number of deaths, Brazil is the country with the largest number of fatalities from COVID-19 in 2021, around 295,000. On June 16th, Wilson Witzel, the former governor of Rio de Janeiro, gave statements to the Parliamentary Oversight Commission into the pandemic. He affirmed that the federal government did not collaborate to combat the pandemic in the state and would have not allowed for hospital beds owned by the federal government to be used to treat patients with the disease. Wilson also said that he became the target of retaliation and sabotage by the president after demanding an impartial investigation into the murder of City Councilwoman Marielle Franco, who was killed in March of 2018. Witzel affirmed to the commission that when her killers were arrested in March of 2019, he began being persecuted. Before that, himself and the president had a good working relation. Wilson Witzel was elected governor of Rio de Janeiro in 2018 with Bolsonaro's support. Witzel was removed from his post in September of last year after being accused of heading a corruption scheme in the state's healthcare system. He was later impeached at the end of April.
Former Health Minister Eduardo Pazuello, who is an active duty military officer, has created a crisis within the armed forces after taking part in a protest alongside President Jair Bolsonaro. According to the law, he is prohibited from participating in this type of activity.
On May 23rd, former Health Minister Eduardo Pazuello, who is an active duty general, participated in a march alongside President Jair Bolsonaro in the city of Rio de Janeiro. The pair incited a mass gathering and neither wore a mask. However, the problems don't end there. According to Brazilian law, active duty military persons cannot take part in political protests.
This serves to hasten the army's increasing loss of morale, an institution that claims to own nothing. This is more or less what the commandant did, and it discredits him as well as the institution.
Internal oversight into Pazuello's conduct commenced the day after the protest. The general publicly defended himself, arguing that the rally had not been political. The excuse was enough to convince Paulo Sérgio Nogueira, Supreme Commander of the Army. The force decided not to punish the former minister, and as if that weren't enough, they placed a 100-year-long gag order on the disciplinary proceedings. For his part, Bolsonaro rewarded Pazuello with a job within the federal government. Today, more than 6,000 members of the armed forces hold civilian jobs inside the administration.
This day in age, generals are parasites in Brazilian society, meaning they live with high salaries, pensions for their widows and family members. So when Bolsonaro says that the easy life is over, surely he wasn't talking about the generals.
Manuel Domingos, who was arrested and exiled for opposing the military regime that was in power between 1964 and 1985, couldn't fathom that the military would once again rule the country so soon. For the historian, Pazuello's pardon is a reflection of the lack of a transitional justice system during the post-dictatorship period.
No one can hold back instruments of force that are battling for political power. It's confusion, it's battling, it's the lack of assurance regarding the preservation of institutionality. They're obviously part of the process, but it's one thing to participate, it's another to have a monopoly. The monopoly over patriotism. This is the biggest disregard that can be experienced by society.
For Pedro Arruda, acknowledging the abuses and crimes committed during the dictatorship would be fundamental in remaking the armed forces. To this day, they are marked by anti-communism, the repression of social movements, and the defense of private property.
It's not enough to change the government. You have to completely remove what's left of this dictatorship, this authoritarian pile of rubble that hasn't been removed.
We will now go to the state of Mato Grosso do Sul to learn about a tradition recently recognized as immaterial Brazilian heritage. It is the Banho de São João, which translates to the Bath of St. John.
In the Ladario and Corumbá municipalities of Mato Grosso do Sul, the month of June is renowned by faith in St. John. On the 23rd, devotees set in procession to the Paraguay River, where images of the saint are bathed. The ritual is based on the biblical story of Jesus' baptism in the waters of the Jordan River conducted by St. John.
So you baptize St. John with the sacred water, and since it's St. John, the water goes back into the river even more sacred, so there is exponential growth in sacredness.
Those who keep the images of the saints in their homes are called festeiros. They are responsible for decorating the floats and organizing the parties that take place before and after the procession.
The festeiro is the person responsible for keeping the faith, the tradition, the devotion to St. John the Baptist. They are the link, the bond that unites the entire community.
The people come and write their requests, the name of their families on the ribbons that remain here for 1 year. And on the day of St. John, we pray, light a fire, and burn the ribbons from the previous year, give thanks to our blessings, and renew our vows.
One of the characteristics of the Bath of St. John is syncretism. Catholics, Spiritists, and devotees of African-rooted religions such as Candomblé and Umbanda all take part. In their sacred grounds, the celebrations for St. John, or the Orisha Xangô, continue on the 24th. Now, in May of 2021, the Bath of St. John was recognized as Brazilian immaterial heritage. However, due to the pandemic, the celebration had to be different. At home, family gatherings replaced the large street parties full of people.
When we go down the hill, I like to say that is the part where St. John takes human form. He becomes a normal human, because he meets with the other floats and they greet each other on the hill. So this aspect that humanizes up there, humanizes down here too. It's the meeting point of devotion.
And now it's time for Brazilianese.
Today's recipe has millenniums of history and is a tradition of the celebrations that happen in Brazil in June. It's hot wine, a delicious drink that cannot be missing during this time of the year. I'll start with the sugar. I'm gonna melt 3/4 of a cup of it in a pan. I will add the spices into the sugar that is melting, clove, cinnamon and cardamom. They'll begin to release their odor and flavor, which will give the wine that special touch. The sugar is already well melted, so I'm going to put the wine in. The sugar will turn into a caramel. It's going to harden, then melt into the wine. Let's go! Now let it boil, melt the sugar and evaporate the alcohol a little bit. We'll then wrap up the wine. Orange peels are things that many people throw away, but they can be used in a lot of recipes, especially if the orange has thick skin. You can scrape off bits and add aroma to salt, sugar or olive oil. You can also use dry peels to make tea, or use them like I will today in hot wine. Or remove this white part with a knife, cut it really thin and cook it in a syrup. It's very interesting to put in salads to eat with yogurt or ice cream. Don't throw any more orange peels away at your home, okay? The wine has heated up and the sugar melted, so I'm going to add the orange peel to give it a little more aroma. Now the diced apple. I'm going to stir it a bit, allow it boil a little more. And it's ready.
Like the show, so hit the like button and share with your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive notifications. We'll see you next week.